Welcome to the Napo podcast. Today we're focusing on an issue that goes right to the heart of fairness, workforce stability, and public safety in probation. Recent changes to immigration rules are putting some probation staff at risk, not because of their ability or commitment, but because of salary thresholds that don't reflect probation pay. I spoke to Napo member Stefani, who raised this issue at conference about what these changes mean in practice, the human impact behind the policy, and why this is something the whole workforce should care about. Last year at conference, you spoke to a motion that was calling for intervention to new immigration rules that could affect people working in probation. For listeners who may not be familiar with the issue, can you explain in simple terms what these visa changes mean for some of our foreign national colleagues?
To put it simply, these changes have made life far more insecure and unfair for many overseas colleagues who are working in probation. Kind of like from April 2024, the government raised the minimum salary needed for a skilled worker visa to 38,700 per year. The problem is that many probation roles simply do not meet that threshold, unfortunately, even though they're skilled, demanding, and essential for public service jobs. That means that employers may no longer be able to sponsor staff, not because the workers aren't good enough, just because the rules have hardly changed around them. And it's the immigration process that doesn't work and doesn't allow the employer essentially to sponsor those individuals. There are a few narrow exceptions around this. So it could be young workers, recent graduates, so they might, but for them, maybe they will be able to kind of access these visas. But for the many experienced probation staff, those routes just don't apply, unfortunately. We're already here. They're already trained to do the job, doing vital work. Obviously, they're just not being paid enough. Essentially, they're being told that they're no longer fit for the system in the current situation. At the same time, some of the other immigration changes that have added pressure as well is restrictions on bringing family members, things like higher income requirements for partners as well, shrinking lists of jobs as well that qualify for kind of like the lower salary thresholds. And, taken together, a lot of these policies have obviously created real anxiety for colleagues. And it's risk driving skilled workers out of probation at a time when it's really crucial for us to have that staff in probation, when we just don't really have the capacity to be able to lose very skilled workers.
When you first heard of these changes, what did you think?
Gosh, for the first time in my experience as a union representative, I really felt completely helpless, I have to say. I couldn't offer reassurance or hope to a specific colleague in my office who really faced a lot of rejection at every turn when he was trying to obtain a skilled visa. Following kind of like his expiring, he was trying to work out a way that he could do that. Unfortunately, on the salary that he was on, it was really devastating to see that with more than 20 years of knowledge, skills, and expertise, he had to plead his case essentially to get a chance for career development, to be able to sustain his job and to be able to get a salary that was going to allow him to get a skilled visa and actually stay in the service. And this was, it's just simply because of the lack of kind of like what his salary was, the salary requirement of £38,000. And if we think about how many people as well do not have that capacity, even someone who's a skilled probation officer with many years of experience, they would not be able to meet that threshold until they're almost like on top of their salary. And that is really difficult for anyone who's on a lower band to be able to reach. So I think we're going to end up losing a lot of staff. What made it even harder as well, I think, in this particular situation with this individual was the lack of flexibility for the service as well. There was no real effort to recognize or value what this person brought to the organization. And it felt like their skills, experience, and contribution simply just didn't matter. Like, he was asking about career development and, opportunities to work in different sectors and different kind of like job opportunities. And it just wasn't really given to him. And I think that's devastating to see for someone who was working with that individual and how hard they were really trying to remain in the service.
So many of the people that would be affected have been working in probation for years and are valued members of the team. What does it say about the system if someone can contribute to public safety one day and then face losing their job or even their right to stay in the country the next?
I think it says something deeply troubling about the system. You can have someone who's been working in probation for years, trained, experienced, trusted to manage risk and to protect the public. And yet, overnight, they're treated as if they're suddenly disposable. Not because they've done anything wrong, not because their work isn't valued, but because the rules have shifted around them. That exposes a real disconnect. On one hand, we recognize that probation work is skilled, demanding, and vital for public safety. On the other hand, Immigration rules now say that the same work isn't skilled enough or valuable enough to meet an arbitrary salary threshold, which is quite high anyway. It sends a message that contribution and commitment basically counts for less than paperwork. And that's not just unfair to the individuals affected. It's damaging for the service as a whole. How people view probation and how people coming into probation as new staff, as people who want to get trained and skilled in the service, they're just not going to feel like they're being valued in that system, particularly for those that are from ethnic minority backgrounds as well, that we want to diversify a system that works with diverse people. If we're willing as a service to lose experienced staff like that, at a time when probation is already under so much pressure, we have to ask whether the system is really working in the interest of justice, safety, and fairness at all, really.
The government has recently talked about putting protections in place for prison staff affected by these rules, but not for probation staff. What message do you think that sends to the probation workforce?
I think it once again just sends a really damaging message to probation staff that their work is somehow seen as less valuable, less skilled, or less worthy of protection. Prison and probation staff are, they're two sides of the same kind of coin of public protection system. Both roles are demanding. They're highly skilled, essential to keeping the public safe. So when protections are discussed for one part of that workforce, but not for the other, it just creates a sense of being overlooked and undervalued. Again, just a lot of divide within that. For probation staff, particularly those already affected by these visa rules, it just reinforces kind of the feeling that their contribution doesn't count in the same way as prison staff. At a time when probation is already under a lot of pressure, we're struggling with recruitment, we're struggling with retention quite a lot, particularly where you're thinking about really skilled and kind of experienced officers, and workloads are incredibly high. So that message is just deeply unhelpful, to think that people are not being valued and we're just going to let them leave. If we want a stable, experienced workforce, we really need to be consistent kind of in recognizing and protecting across the whole justice system. So it's not just kind of like a hierarchy that matters, like prison is more important because that's where staff are really needed, but probation is also really important, particularly with the sentencing legislation changes that are coming through. We're going to see a lot more people coming on probation and a lot more staff are going to be needed in the service. We can't really afford that to be so different.
What would you like to see happen next, and how can members show solidarity with colleagues who are affected?
I'm really glad to hear that the motion has had the desired effect. And the next step, I think, has to be action. We need to see that the government and the probation service engage seriously with the reality facing probation staff, starting with transitional visa arrangements that protect people who are already here, already trained, and already doing really vital work to protect the public. No one should lose their job or their right to stay simply because the rules changed after they committed to a career in the public service. We also need employers to show flexibility. They need to recognize skills, experience, and contribution, and to support colleagues to access developmental and kind of like progression really where possible within their career, rather than just kind of putting up barriers and not allowing people to progress. I think as members, solidarity really matters in these situations. That means speaking up when we see colleagues being treated unfairly. It's backing union campaigns, supporting motions like this, and making it clear that an attack on one part of the workforce, it really does affect all of us. Standing alongside our overseas colleagues isn't just the right thing to do. It's about protecting the future of probation, a stable, skilled, and fair public service. And I also really want to express my sincere thanks to the South Yorkshire branch for bringing this motion to conference and helping to make this change possible. Their determination, their courage, commitment to fairness have really been truly inspirational for a lot of us, particularly at conference. I can remember the feeling and kind of like the passion that everyone had when that motion was brought forward. And they really reminded me as well why collective action really matters and why speaking up makes a difference. As a vocal activist for employees' rights, I draw real strength from their example, and I know that many others will as well moving forward.
That was Stefani speaking about the impact of immigration changes on probation staff. This is an issue that goes beyond individual cases. It's about how we value the people who keep the public safe and whether the system is set up to support or undermine them. Because protecting probation isn't just about workloads or pay. It's about protecting the people who make the service what it is.